Hey, listeners, welcome back to Sustainability Street, our podcast on the intersection of commercial real estate and the world we live in. I'm your host, Therese Fitzgerald. We all know that the Earth is getting hotter, but when we think of the heat crisis, we often think of droughts and wildfires and the heat island effect in urban residential communities. My guest for this episode, Savills Vice Chair Katrina Kostic Samen, has been focused on the impacts of heat from a different perspective, the impact of heat on the workplace and on occupant behavior. Samen, who heads Savills Workplace Studio, recently co-authored a white paper titled Heat and Humanity: Protecting People and Building a Resilient Future. The paper contains some surprising findings and recommendations, and I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. Hi, Katrina. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Therese. Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to be here.
Before we start talking about heat, tell my listeners about your practice at Savills and how you came to that role.
Thank you. Well, it's been quite a long journey. I've been in commercial real estate for over 40 years. I've been with Savills for 6.5, and really good fortune to be here in New York City. 2.5 years ago, I moved here from London to set up the Savills Workplace and Design Studio. And I've had the pleasure to cross North America. I've seen 17 different cities. I've met loads and loads of wonderful people here at Savills. And really, my goal is to connect the dots both globally and locally in North America about what workplace can do with the people, its workforce, and sustainability, and bring that to the brokers who then inform our clients. Prior to joining Savills, I had my own practice, KKS Strategy, and that was recently acquired. Well, that was acquired by Savills 6.5 years ago. And so my design studio in London still remains under the leadership of Caroline Pontifex. And prior to that, I had the business for 16 years, was able to both workplace strategy and design projects for multiple clients all over the world. We had the pleasure to work in many different kinds of regions, both hot and cold. And then prior to that, I started my career with Gensler. I was there 19 years, first initially in Washington, D.C. and New York, and then was part of the team to co-found the London office for Gensler, growing that to over 300 people. So my background really spans the globe. It spans many sizes of projects, from very small to very large, and it spans a whole host of situations and changes that have occurred over the last 4 decades.
Yeah, and I guess today workplace design is a really pressing issue.
100%. It's accelerated everything that myself and my colleagues believe in. Before when I started KKS, which was actually exactly 21 years ago, January of 2004, it seemed like nobody wanted to talk about the people. It was just selling real estate. The developer had their goals. The tenant was trying to find buildings, but there wasn't what I call the glue that takes a strategic view of the inside out approach to both building design and what tenants need and want and desire. And hopefully the tenants, the developers and the landlords are now working in partnership together, because everybody's now really enlightened and engaged post-COVID. So I think this is a really exciting time that we sort of passed that era, and now we're taking advantage of everything that we've learned throughout, good and bad, of how people work, that they're not tethered to their desk anymore, that there is flexibility and variety, and that's really what I'm very excited about.
And when and how did heat become an interest for you as you serve your clients?
Heat has been, I've been thinking about this over the last couple of years, specifically being in North America, and partly because I have had the pleasure of crisscrossing around the US. and seeing different geographics in terms of East Coast, West Coast, the humidity down in Texas, or the freezing cold up in Chicago. I've also had the pleasure to work with my colleagues in our sustainability team and our workforce teams. And really, what it looks like to me is that air conditioning is prevalent everywhere in the US, and it pumps, pumps, pumps away in the hot summer months. And then the heating has to be controlled and pumped in again in the cold months. And if you couple that with how people are working and potentially not using buildings as we design them 24/7, or even hoping Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, we see that there's a disconnect between both the building specification, it's not keeping up with technology and the heat. It's also a building crisis in terms of the climate change, and the temperatures are just rapidly growing. And so my background, both in architecture, interiors, and environmental psychology, led me to think about, why are we forcing people into these cold refrigeration boxes when it's actually very hot outside, and the converse and vice versa, and what is the mental effect on how we work. And then subsequent to that, I was thinking, well, why do we force people to come back, 365 days a year, which I know is going to be controversial, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can think about better building design, impact on mental health, reduce the aging process, the commute much more interesting and sustainable. And also, should we think about seasonal working? That means that potentially, radical idea, but maybe in the heat of the summer and heat of the winter or cold of the winter, we don't actually need to be trudging in. And most of the time, we can't even get in if it's too much snow, sleet, rain, or heat. And why don't we maximize the times of the year that actually are spring and autumn?
That's a really interesting concept
It
and
is
a little
not popular with a
radical.
lot of people, very
Yeah.
radical. And whether we get to that point or not is unknown. But what it did lead me to do is to do some wonderful research with my colleague Jose Ramirez, as I mentioned, the co-author of the report, but also Sylvia Mills, who is our researcher, who did a fantastic job. And what that led on to was a whole culmination of looking at, from one extreme, innovation in air conditioning units and micro zoning of the ability now, to the net zero implications and full electricity uh, buildings like the JP Morgan that are being run on hydro, how we now have to work with our local cities, communities, councils to work in tandem wherever your city or building is located, to the subway system and how does it cope or not cope in the heat. But also, if you take a look at the mental impact of heat on people, we know that significant small little changes in degrees actually reduces performance. And then that started to lead me on to the worry about human behavior. And we all know that when we get too hot, we get sluggish, we get tired, we have to adjust, it takes too long. And the statistics show that there's more emergency uh, occupants that come to the ER if it's over 90 degrees. We know that the subway system falls every time, every degree higher than 70 degrees. And we know that we start to be less productive and we start to make mistakes. And so all of
Mhm.
these things led me into thinking, well, I'd like to just research, what does this mean? And I'd like to bring pure data to the tenants, to the landlords, to the developers, to the way that we work and operate, so that our buildings and our place and our people are much smarter as an integrated society.
Yeah, and I guess I always thought of heat being a problem for certain geographies, but I guess it's a critical issue for everyone.
100%. We could talk about whether you just live in, the sunnier climates or the heat, but actually it does affect everyone, because we know today that actually with climate change, you cannot write the story anymore. From London, everyone thinks London is cold and gray and rainy. Well, I can tell you, we've had the hottest summers on record. We
Hmm.
had far hotter summer than even here in New York City. In New York City, 2 years ago was deluged with rain, and JFK was closing, and the subway system was underwater. So I don't think you can categorize anymore
Hmm.
cities or geographies by the climate. It's just radically changing to what we're certainly not used to anymore.
Yeah, and how does heat impact the whole return to office conversation? You indicated something about maybe we should only work seasonally. Uh,
Well,
talk more about that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So, Jose's team with sustainability sort of looks at it from a bigger picture, the macro, in terms of what are the publicly stated goals of organizations and companies. And we know that people, new recruits, do look at the sustainable and corporate responsibility goals of organizations if they are so minded to be environmentally aware. And so there are publicly stated goals and objectives. The problem comes in is that all the good intentions in the world for the companies, they can't actually be integrated or implemented by the real estate teams, because often the corporate real estate teams um, are the boots on the ground, and they don't either have the resources or they can't make the changes fast enough. And so there is a disconnect, and there's no roadmap between what the public corporate responsibilities say and what you're actually able to do. And so what Jose and his team are able to do here at Savills is provide a roadmap. Once there's a roadmap, then I come in and talk about how that is impacting the change for people. And so we start to gather, well, why are the people not coming in? And like I said, we know that people on a hot day, if it goes above 90 degrees, people get onto the subway stops or fails, or it's too hot. They turn around and they may not even make it on the train, let alone actually go one or two stops or maybe 10 stops in. We
Hmm.
then know that when you get to the office, you need a cool down period. And so what if we were designing more cool down opportunities, whether that's a refrigerated room or whether that's ice cold drinks? But it does take quite some time for the body to self-regulate itself if it's been overheated, just like a car would be. And so we sort of have a whole life cycle at Savills. So where if we can find the roadmap with our sustainability team, if from the design and the workplace strategy team, we can actually tell you what people should do or how you can change. And then we have our project management team that actually builds it. But the climate change is also impacting how we as Savills state the environmental policies. And we have a very strong environmental ethos globally. And we really believe that pumping carbon into the zone, into the ether, is really not where we want to be. We also know that there's huge pressure on electricity right now, that the more electricity you pump in for air conditioning or for heating means that you potentially are taking away from the grid. Then it means that all the AI that is coming in now and all those farms of all those servers and all those quantum areas of locating servers are not there. We know that electricity costs are rising and rising today. And I think on everybody's mind today is the cost of living. And do you have heat or do you eat? I liken it, do you chill or do you pay your bill?
Hmm.
There is a personal aspect to the trickle down effect of all of this. And if in fact the return to the office is not happening on certain times of the year, like August, for example, or January or February, um, there's a lot of things that we think we can do. We can either help the commute, we can change our working practices, or when we get to the office, we actually have an office that is well designed, whether that's the facade, whether that's green roofs, whether that's chill down areas, that we can actually help, because ultimately it's not just about a comfort issue. It's a critical business risk if our people are not performing and if they're making mistakes. And so that's really ultimately what I want to make sure that we bring back to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about heat impacting behavior, but I guess it does. Um, it
Yeah,
does.
100%. We can show that in the hot months, certainly over 90 degrees in New York City, that the subway system has a 9% decrease, and that whether it's August or just a heat wave in June. And when you start taking away 9% of the population because they're just not even able to get in the office or won't go in the office, then you start to have again the trickle down to the return to the office. Conversely, we still heat and cool our buildings, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or 9 to 7, whatever the system is set at. And yet we know that statistically, people are not coming in on Fridays. You probably have 10 to
Hmm.
20% of the occupants, if you're lucky, on a Friday, and yet we still pump in the same amount of heating and the same amount of cooling. So again, there's a behavioral change there, that maybe the people should be co-located on a Friday in a certain zone, or maybe we can have, dare I say, operable windows or places that people could actually choose to work differently.
Hmm.
Because I think Fridays are a great day to come in. It is quiet. You can get things done. You
Yeah.
can meet with your team. You can be dressed down. I love coming in on Fridays, but I'd be very happy to work somewhere else if they were to close off the zone I'm sitting in. if I then know that the reporting effects of that saves not only money and electricity, but it's actually good for the environment, then I would feel much better about that. So I think everybody is fully aware today of the environment, and whether you believe in climate change or you don't, there are certain things that we know can help you, and we know that there are certain things that people care about.
Um, so the white paper outlined three ways that you can adapt to heat in the built environment. Talk
Mhm.
about some of those.
Sure. So we laid out actually on page 6 three different ways that we could think about in the short term. One is rethinking the building design, and there's huge strides in glass now. We know that glass keeps out the sunshine. Everybody tends to want to have or aspire to a windowed office or a corner office. If it's south facing, then your perception is that you get the sun, but we know that the sun is way too hot, and most people who sit on the south facing side draw their blinds.
Hmm.
So the buildings have to use smart glass. They need double glazing, maybe triple glazing. Or maybe we start to think about, well, actually, the north side is actually really nice. And that's typically where you put a trading floor because you don't get the glare of screens. Or maybe you have circulation at the window and you pull the offices away from the window. So I think it's about the building design. It's the facade. It's all about the roofs. We know that we can put green roofs on, and that's almost like an umbrella that will shield the heat, and it will keep the heat out, and it will automatically just keep the building cooled itself. There are smart facades that let air in and out. And some of the new innovations that I'd love to be able to see is better circulation of airflow. The more airflow that we move around, the healthier it is, and not just stagnant air from the air within the building, but actually drawing on the air from outside, because fresh air actually makes people feel better. What about if we could control the humidity, just like we do lighting controls and we set the humidity? We know that higher humidity holds in heat. So why don't we have a degree or two more humidity in the winter? Why don't we lower the humidity in the summer in order to keep the cool
Hmm.
in? When you feel cooler, as you know, it's better to sleep in, but also your brain is sharper. That's why they pump cold air into meeting rooms and large event spaces to keep you awake because you are sharper. You don't fall asleep, but also on a one-on-one basis, you actually make less mistakes. And so all of that, I would love to be able to see on smart design. That's number one. Number two is going on to the concept of sustainability and planting and biophilia. We talked about the green roofs. There are many ways to add plants within an environment that helps the oxygen. It helps people breathe better. Absolutely, by far. And then the third way really is about zoning the systems and thinking about behavior, and maybe offering ways to have the day not be 9 to 5, but maybe start earlier in the morning when it's not so hot, finish earlier in the afternoon when the heat starts rising, or conversely, the other way around. Or certain months, offset work from home on in August, but I want you in full time September and October. I think there are ways that behavioral shifts might have to occur in order to help all of these things that are changing in the world.
Yeah, and I think some of that might seem kind of radical in the United States, but I think other hot countries do work like that, right? Where they
Absolutely.
adjust
I
their
think,
schedules.
yeah, they do. I mean, I think the Mediterranean is always being laughed at as taking the siesta or the
Hmm.
afternoon nap, or longer holidays and taking August off. Um, I think that there is some merit to thinking about it more in terms of the environmental, because so what I found in the US is that, people are in all the time, or need to be in all the time, or say they should be in all the time, but
Hmm.
actually with holidays the way they are, vacations, people want to enjoy themselves, take the breaks. More and more people are taking off longer in August. People are taking off longer more at Christmas. So I think naturally it's starting to generate itself, where we don't have air conditioning in Europe. That's causing problems for some, for tourists, etc. But I
Hmm.
think they are better adapted because the buildings are more solid. They're not fully glass. They have the operable windows. They have raised floors for displaced air. We have beam ceilings and chilled ceilings. So the building design is very different than it is here in the US. So controversial. I think it's just a discussion I would love to have about what might suit, might work in different cities around the world. But climates are changing, so one size does not fit all. And what you thought about even just a few years ago is rapidly changing now.
Yeah. Um, so we've all been in an office building that's too hot and one that's too cold. How can owners and large tenants make their environments more natural and temperate? And is there an ideal temperature for the office environment?
I think ideal will be is up to the individuals what the ideal is. I think that there is naturally a tendency for women generalization, but to like the warmer climate, so 2 degrees warmer than men. I think that there are ways to mitigate from 70 degrees as your baseline temperature at Fahrenheit. We know things start to deteriorate every degree higher than that. And over 90 degrees, it just really, people's bodies start to sort of shut down and really think about how hot they are and making the wrong decisions. So it's in that sort of margin of 70 to 80, I would say, as far as temperate. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that the zoning and the micro zone units that for fan coil units, which is very prevalent here in the US, and the new innovations that they're making in air conditioning is terrific. And I think that it has minimal usage when you can zone areas and it's pumping the carbon out as opposed to keeping it in. So if air conditioning is your solution, then I think that we need to think about zoning areas and that therefore designing for that. And that means floor plate design. It means core design in order to have these air handling units more localized versus in the ceiling potentially. So I think there's an interesting building design conversation. The conversation around good examples or best in class examples. The most current one, as you may have heard about, is the 270 Park Avenue for JP Morgan's new headquarters
Hmm.
in New York City, which has just opened. It's not featured in my report, but I would love to add it. So I will be contacting them to see because they are a net zero emission building, 100%, as I mentioned, electric. It's powered by the hydro and the rivers that are around in New York City. So they have carefully and very smartly integrated with the city early on in the strategic planning years and years ago. But I think there are ways to um, we there are ways to temperate the environment if we want a sealed box or an air conditioned or a heated solution. But we do need to we probably need to cool our buildings slightly colder and less and accept in the heating and the cooling that there's going to be a median that's lower than what you're used to. And whether that's a change in your behavior or it's adding a sweater when you come to the office and wearing it as opposed to hoping that the building is super hot when you come in. So there's a lot of change afoot, but reducing consumption, wasting energy is not going to be the future.
Yeah, exactly. So how should owners and tenants or tenant reps who read your report, um, what should they do if they're interested in addressing the heat issue?
I think they first of all get in touch with us because I'd love a conversation about it. And Jose and I would do that. But I do think that there are things that they can do. I think, first of all, to read the report because there is strong data in there that talks about a lot of different things. But I am very interested in the mental health and well-being. I'm also interested in we know that heat ages people, and we know that the population is aging right now quite rapidly. So I have a concern about that. We have also have 6 generations in the workforce, which is fantastic, but it does mean we have generational issues that we have to adhere to as well. So I think that ideally take a look at your people, what the makeup of the people is, where you're going to be recruiting from. And dare I say it, all the AI and robotics is going to bring a whole nother um, uh, issue into that, because of the way that people have to be heated and cooled are very different than the robotics,
Yeah.
which is much more cooling. Um, so there are some podcasts, there's some books that are out there. I would highly recommend listening to Bill Gates. Bill is really a on the forefront innovator, and he has a book, which is an audiobook as well, called How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. There are many other books and podcasts that I could recommend. But I think people have to be aware, they have to care, and they have to really take a look at the buildings that they're maybe designing or going into, and understand what all the energy efficiency and criteria are, and think about the future of how people come in to the office, because I do think people should be in the office, but we have to think differently and smarter and how we enjoy being together. There's no point in bringing a lot of people in if we're all too hot or too cold, huddled up in our little rooms. So I'm very, very excited about the future. I'd love to be able to help do a roadmap for us so that the subways are cooler. I wish that the world was getting cooler and not hotter. But I think we have to take into account that this is here to stay, that things are changing rapidly, and heat is playing a massive part of that.
Yeah, I think the 10 hottest years on record have been the last 10. Is that
Exactly. When
right?
you read that, yeah, when you look
Yeah,
at the
it's shocking.
2025 was the hottest year on record. And then you look at the last 10 years have actually been since 2015, which means they have been every year
Yeah.
since then, and it's just getting worse, and it's changing too. And it's not only just hot on the day that you expected it to be sunny or hot or cold, but it starts to affect the wind patterns and the rain and the snow patterns. And as we can see, I fly a lot around the U.S. and it changes. You know, the airlines are struggling to cope. Your delays in the airports, the closures of the snow, which we're having now, or you're having the closures of the heat, or the subway stops working because the heat, bends the metal of the rails, or it's too hot, claustrophobic if the air conditioning isn't working and it's not safe. So it's happening now rapidly. And the way that we imagine we could travel just as we used to travel and expect that we will get to where we want to get to on time is not happening now. And the environment is playing a big part of that.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming on
It's
the
not here in
program.
doom and gloom. I just wanted people to be aware, and hopefully think of it positively. I think the buildings that we profile in our report, and the ones that are aware, are just so much more rich and vital, and really our tenants are so much happier in those kind of buildings. So I really appreciate it from everyone here at Savills. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining me on Sustainability Street. If you have any questions about this episode or suggestions for future episodes, please reach out to me at therese.fitzgerald@cpe-mhn.com. And don't forget to rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Bye for now.